one chance, one place. Discovery Health Channel. Real life, medicine, miracles.
Impact. How much can the human body take? And after a skydiver videotapes his own crash landing, he is trapped in a gully with a broken back. In an instant, your life can be shattered. Without warning, your body broken, your future left hanging by a thread. Only the heroism of total strangers, cutting-edge technology, and the practice of bold medicine stand between life and death. These are stories of survival, about real people pushed past their limits. Lives forever changed by a moment of impact. A skydiver wearing a helmet camera documents his own crash landing. He is badly hurt, nowhere near his landing site, and alone. On March 9th, 2003, Shane Sanford went skydiving with friends over Vinemont, Alabama. The jumpers climbed out onto a rail on the side of the airplane. Shane isn't in the picture. He was wearing the camera on his helmet. As the most experienced jumper of the group, he was the last to open his parachute. The others threw out 30 seconds before they would have hit the ground. And Shane threw out at just 15. Shane's friends were up high enough to ride the strong winds that day to the drop zone near the airport. Shane knew he wouldn't make it and headed for an open field. Suddenly, air turbulence pushed down his parachute, and Shane dropped like a rock.
Oh my gosh.
Shane was in horrible pain. He was almost a mile off course, at the bottom of a gully, with no way to contact anyone. Shane knew his left ankle had snapped. He was in agony, but he had to find help. With his one good leg, Shane started pushing himself up the slope. Shane began to realize he also had pain in his back. What he didn't know was that his back was broken. Every move risked paralyzing both his legs. Shane started to think he wasn't going to make it. As he struggled to get his parachute and helmet off, he heard a screen door open somewhere above him.
I heard someone calling. The tone of his voice, it just automatically stuck. Something's not right. You know, something's wrong here.
Shane told Kathy that his ankle was broken. The pain coming up his leg was so severe that he didn't even know his back was broken.
What's wrong?
Kathy's cousin Ricky came down too, and Shane asked him to call the airport. Shane's girlfriend Jan still had no idea anything was wrong.
We got a call and they said, you know, we've got your skydiver and we've called an ambulance. We think he's broken his foot. And so I didn't think, you know, broken foot, oh well, dummy.
10 minutes later, early responders Terry and Mary Holcomb arrived.
Try not to move.
He had, looked like a fracture to his leg, was complaining about some back pain. So we immediately stabilized his C-spine by putting on a cervical collar.
2 minutes later, the ambulance pulled up.
The only obvious injury he had was a fractured left ankle.
Where's your back hurting at? Right in the middle.
But the EMTs knew Shane's injuries were probably much worse than his broken ankle. When Shane's parachute lost lift, he accelerated to over 35 miles per hour. He hit the ground feet first. The impact shattered his left leg at the ankle and tore all the ligaments connecting his foot. Then, his lower body hit, shattering the L2 vertebra. Shards of exploded bone were left pressing against the nerves in his spinal column. Paramedics were extremely careful not to move Shane's back. Any bending or twisting could cause bone fragments to sever the nerves to his legs. At Coleman Regional Medical Center, Shane was given painkillers, but the pain from the broken and dislocated bones in his leg was still overwhelming.
We decided to immediately put it back in a more anatomical position.
Shane was given X-rays and CT scans. It was clear Shane would need major surgery on his spine. Dr. Christian went to talk to Jan and Shane's family.
When the doctor came out, he was telling us about his leg, and then he said that he had also broken his back. And they didn't know how bad it was. And I think that that was the worst part, is not knowing if he was going to be okay. The first thing I thought was, is he going to be able to walk? And he said, I can't answer that. I know that he needs surgery, and I know that he's shattered a vertebrae. So at that point, I was thinking the worst, and everybody was.
This small hospital couldn't handle the spinal surgery Shane needed. He had to be transferred to the University of Alabama Medical Center in Birmingham, 45 minutes away. There, neurosurgeon Paul Matz confirmed the grim diagnosis.
His fractures were pretty severe. In Shane's case, L2 was crushed. And what happens in a person, it's like sitting on a jelly donut. If you put enough force, the jelly's going to squirt out. If you put enough axial load on the person's bones, eventually they'll crush and give out. One would have expected him to have been paralyzed based on the degree of the fracture and the angulation.
With his back immobilized, the doctors decided to give the nerves of Shane's spine time to recover from the trauma of the impact. They would operate on Shane's leg first. In a 3-hour operation, Shane's leg bones were rebuilt with a titanium rod for support. 13 screws were needed to hold the pieces together. His ligaments were reattached, and his leg was put in a cast. Shane's body was allowed to recover for almost 2 days.
It was emotionally draining. I was at the hospital. I stayed there from the time it happened until I got out.
Finally, Shane was prepped for the spinal surgery. Surgeons went in through Shane's belly, pushing his organs aside to get at the front of the spine. In the most dangerous part of the operation, Dr. Matz carefully removed the shattered vertebrae, exposing the delicate nerves of the spinal column.
I want something as basically a pillar of support, a foundation.
Dr. Matz inserted a titanium cage where Shane's L2 vertebra used to be. Pieces of the broken bone and a piece of one of Shane's ribs were placed in the structure.
What happens is the body thinks there's a fracture there. It knows there's a fracture, and it'll put all the bone-generating mechanisms in tow and fuse it down to a solid piece of bone.
When Shane woke up, everyone waited to see if the nerves to his legs had survived the operation. He wiggled his toes. It was astonishing. The man who should have been killed or paralyzed on impact would survive with no permanent damage.
My thoughts when I was laying in the hospital was, how long is it going to be before I can skydive again?
Shane wanted desperately to get back to it, but he couldn't stop thinking about his disastrous last jump.
We exited the aircraft a little past the drop zone. I was losing altitude, and I couldn't make it back to the drop zone. The drop zone was probably a half a mile from where I was, so I just picked a good spot to land, a small field. When I turned into the wind, which the winds were very high that day, the turbulence coming off the trees forced my canopy down. I basically dropped like a sack of potatoes. I landed on my feet, and then my body collapsed on top of my legs. It like I jumped straight down off of a 4-story building.
Oh my gosh.
I was just thinking I need to get my gear off because the paramedics are going to cut it. I was definitely glad to hear a voice because to me, 35 minutes, I was hurting pretty good at that point.
He basically managed to tolerate an impact that would have killed many people and still have normal neurological function.
After 2 weeks in the hospital, Shane went home.
When he got out of the hospital, he started rehab. We would rotate having our down days. I would push him up, and the next day he'd have to do it to me.
Over the next few months, the cast came off, and the bone fragments in Shane's back grew together. He was fully recovered at last.
My accident was on March 9th. The next jump that I made was December 27th, the same year, 9 months later.
This time, Shane's friends did the videotaping.
I'm about as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs.
I love parachuting. I will always enjoy parachuting. I will skydive and, you know, for the rest of my life, as long as I can.
There you go. Woo! Good job, man.
This time, a perfect landing.
Excellent. Welcome back, man.